This video is sponsored by the Ultimate Freelancing Bundle by StudyWebDevelopment.com, which gives you everything you need to start your own freelancing business, including a 130-page in-depth guide, invoicing and client proposal templates, website templates, an SEO checklist, and much more. Visit the link in the description and use the code BRAD25 to get 25% off. Hey guys, in this video I want to talk a little bit about what a front-end, back-end, and full-stack developer is and what that consists of in terms of technologies and responsibilities, because I think that this can confuse a lot of people that are just getting started in web development. So hopefully this can help you understand it better and also maybe pick a path if you're kind of undecided. All right, so front-end developers are responsible for basically the user-facing experience of a website or web app. So when you go to some website or application in your browser, the UI that pops up that you interact with, that's front-end web development. As far as technologies, front-end devs need to be well-versed in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Those are kind of the three top main technologies to learn. However, there's many different things to learn within that realm. So for instance, you have front-end JavaScript frameworks. Most companies these days are using something like React, Vue, or Angular on the front end, on the client side. And this allows user interfaces to be very dynamic, interactive, much more advanced than they used to be years ago. So along with JavaScript frameworks, especially with larger applications, you have state managers like Redux, Vuex for Vue, NGRX. There's a bunch of them out there, and the whole concept of state can be very confusing. So front-end development is not nearly as easy as it used to be. In fact, it's right up there with back-end development now, because so many things that we used to do on the back end we're now doing on the client side, like routing and stuff like that. All right, you also have UI frameworks, also called CSS frameworks, like Bootstrap, Materialize, Balma. These aren't technically needed to be a front-end developer, but it's good to know because there are a lot of companies that use these because they allow them to create things faster. I think learning Bootstrap is important. However, you definitely need to be comfortable with things like CSS Grid, Flexbox, just regular CSS before jumping into Bootstrap. It's definitely a tool, not a crutch, so you don't want to depend on a UI or CSS framework. All right, you're also going to need to learn about various tools, obviously a text editor like VS Code. You should learn all the shortcuts, extensions that can make your life easier, make you code faster, things like that. Git, version control, definitely need to know Git, know how to add, commit, push, pull, clone, all that stuff, and also how to collaborate with others. I think that learning how to write code with other developers is a skill in itself. Which is kind of difficult when you come from a freelancing background. When I went from freelancing to working with other developers, there was a lot of stuff that I had to learn. Some other tools include NPM, Yarn, which are package managers, CSS processors like Sass, browser tools, dev tools. You should be familiar with most of the tabs in Google Chrome dev tools. Now, even if you're a front-end developer, you should understand how HTTP works. You may not be writing server-side code and creating APIs and stuff like that, but you will be interacting with servers or interacting with back-end APIs. So you need to know how to fetch data using something like the Fetch API or Axios, which is an HTTP library. You should be familiar with most of the HTTP status codes. Okay, you should be friendly with the Chrome DevTools network tab so you can see exactly what's going on when you're getting data from the server, getting files from the server, any errors that are being sent, things like that. So even though you're a front-end dev, you should understand the full process of how HTTP and the whole request response cycle works. And JSON is also very important because most of, if not all of the APIs you're going to be working with are going to give you JSON data. So it's important to understand how JSON is structured, and it's pretty simple. You could learn JSON in a day or two, really, if you're already familiar with like JavaScript objects. All right, so I think design and UX is important in front-end web development, even though a lot of companies will have the UI UX designers that will create the whole look and feel, and then it's your job to basically turn that into a living application or website. But for smaller companies or some smaller companies that I've had experience with, the front end developer is actually the designer as well. So you might have that situation. Of course, if you're freelancing, you'll have to create your own layouts and design and stuff like that. So I think it is important to have at least somewhat of an eye for design when it comes to front end development. You definitely don't want to build all your stuff with like vanilla bootstrap themes. So as far as front-end development, it's definitely not easy. It's a lot harder than it used to be. It used to be it was mostly server-side stuff, and then maybe a template engine to display your HTML and CSS. So it's definitely gotten more difficult. All right, so let's move to the back end. Back end is server-side code. It runs on the server instead of on your client side. You can think of the back end kind of as like building the foundation and frame of a house. And then the front end is like maybe the interior design or decorator. So backend developers need to learn a programming language, which could be anything, including JavaScript now with Node.js, which is actually my favorite server-side technology. But you also have PHP, Python, ASP.NET, Java, just about any language you can use on the server side. And in many cases, you'll be using a framework on the back end as well. Okay, so for Node, you have Express, PHP, you have Laravel, Python, you have Django and Flask, and there's a whole bunch of frameworks for just about every language. And you might have a situation where you build your own framework or your company has their own framework. So backend developers also have to be very comfortable with databases. Just about every front-facing app has to store data somewhere. It could be a relational database like MySQL or Postgres. It could be a NoSQL database like MongoDB, and then there's many other types as well. So as a backend developer, it's your responsibility to kind of structure the data in an efficient way. Not only that, but you need to be able to handle the entire request response cycle. So HTTP, you need to understand HTTP status codes even more so than a front-end developer, because it's up to you to respond to every request to the back end in the correct way. Okay, so you should know, 200 means okay, 400 is a bad request, 500 is a server error, and then everything in between. Many times you'll be creating all the endpoints for the front-end developer to hit and interact with. So in those endpoints, you'll be querying the database in some way. And a lot of times you'll be working with some kind of ORM, which is an object relational mapper, I believe it stands for. But it's just basically an abstraction layer to interact with the database as opposed to writing raw SQL queries. So an example of that would be like Mongoose for MongoDB or SQLize for SQL databases. All right, so even though you might be using something like that, it still is important to learn SQL if you're going to be a backend developer. All right, backend development doesn't always consist of building APIs and making queries to a database. You may have to deal with complex algorithms, compression, machine learning. It really depends on the type of project, but it can get pretty difficult. Security is another big thing for backend developers and, of course, full stack developers. You need to make sure your routes are protected and that data that shouldn't be accessed can't be accessed. You need to protect against things like cross-site scripting, SQL injections, all that good stuff. Backend developers also need to know more DevOps and production configuration than a front-end developer does. You're working directly with the server, unlike front-end devs, so knowing your production environment is really important, and you may even have to learn about virtualization, Docker containers, maybe Vagrant stuff, technologies like that. All right, so when it comes to full stack development, it's pretty much everything I just talked about. It's all the front end stuff and the back end stuff, and having them work together, which can be very difficult. You might have multiple APIs, multiple microservices that you're building, and then you have to connect the front end. You might have a certain API where you're developing a web app to connect to it, as well as a mobile app or maybe even a desktop app or something else. And obviously this is an example of a really large project. You're not always going to be doing that kind of stuff, but my point is you're going to have to learn how to put things together. So being a full stack dev, you can build some really cool stuff if you have the ability to build the server side, interact with the database, and also build a really nice user interface, then you can do a lot of stuff on your own within reason, of course. But just because you're a full stack developer doesn't mean when you go to a company they're just going to stick you in your own department and you're going to do everything. You tend to lean more to one side at a company, so either the front end or the back end. It seems like nowadays it's more towards the front end, but it really depends on the company and what you're doing at the company. But you will be working with other developers of all types. So as far as salary, I think that this really depends on certain factors like where you live, the company you're working for, you and your skill set. It really depends on that. Typically, front-end developers make more just because they have more experience, not more experience, but more skills. They can do more for the company, but being a front-end or a back-end developer they're not far behind in terms of salary. And as far as front-end versus back-end, I don't really see a clear answer for that, because I've seen front-end positions that are being paid a lot more than some back-end and vice versa. So I can't really say which one makes the most in all situations, because it really depends on a lot of different things. So I don't like making stupid statements like all full stack developers get paid more or something like that. So I mean, you can do your own research on that if you want, but I have seen that full stack developers tend to make a little more than the other ones. All right, now as far as what you want to do, I wouldn't base it on just on salary. I would base it on what you're interested in. A lot of people are visual people. They want to create stuff in the browser that they can actually see and interact with. So those types of developers will probably lean more towards front end, and then the really, the computer science majors and people that like to work, build structures from the ground up, deal with data and stuff like that, you're probably going to gravitate more towards back end. Or if you really like both, like I do, then you're probably going to go full stack. Just realize that being a full stack developer is a lot of work. You have to learn a lot of different technologies, and it's very overwhelming. So just keep that in mind. I think to be a really good full stack developer, you have to love what you do. You have to love to learn as well, which I'm sure a lot of you guys do if you're watching my channel. So I think that's it. Hopefully this helps some of you guys, especially for new people that are kind of confused on what this even means, front end, back end, and so on, and what technologies go with what and what you should be learning, and maybe push you towards one way or the other. So thanks for watching, guys. If you like this video, please leave it a like, and I'll see you next time. Hey guys, one of the best, if not the best resource I can refer you to for starting a freelance business is at studywebdevelopment.com/freelancing. The creator Kyle shared it with me, and I can personally vouch that this bundle is well worth it. You get a 130-page guide to freelancing, and it comes with things like invoice templates, client proposals, HTML and CSS templates, a portfolio website, access to a private Facebook community, and much more. So use the code BRAD25 to get 25% off today.